Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here. I'm finally back. I finally have my voice back and I'm no longer sick. After what has felt like years, though I think it's only been a week or two. Anyway, so a lot has happened since I got sick. The day I got sick was the announcement of Total War Warhammer 2, which is primarily what we're going to be talking about today. As well as just a couple other small notes, but this is mostly going to be what we're going to talk about is just, of course, the announcement trailer, things that have been revealed about the game, and what you guys can expect, and what you should be looking out for in the near future, because I have been wanting to make a video about this for a while now, because I don't want to say any specific names, but let's just say I've watched a lot of footage. Well, there are a couple people I'll name, just because they're so big that I don't think they mind if I make fun of them for it. But there have been a couple of really big people like IGN and some of those other corporations who've made videos about Total War Warhammer 2, and to say it bluntly, they're just kind of talking out of their ass to an extent, and a lot of people are saying really goofy things. A lot of people are saying things that are just wrong. So I think it's finally time, now that my voice is back, for me to throw my hat into the ring and provide some accurate answers on what's going on, what you can expect from Total War Warhammer 2, and what information we have so far. There are a lot of people who are just kind of coming out and vomiting out their opinions without checking any of the sources or the information that Creative Assembly has put out via FAQs and answering questions on Reddit and Twitter, which I've been watching and cataloging. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and watch the release video together. I'll pause it for anything that's like super important. It's really loud. I have seen this trailer so many times already, because there's so many little hints and secrets I've been looking at. So obviously we start off with Dark Elves. There have been some people who will tell you that these are just elves. First of all, how do I know these are Dark Elves? Number one, they've got really spiky armor. If there's a lot of spikes, it's probably Dark Elves. There's a reason that the Greenskins refer to them as the Spiky Elves, as opposed to anything else. Like, that's how the Greenskins recognize these guys. Dark Elves are also much more inclined to wear purple garments. High Elves don't do purple. They do blue. Or teal. Or, like, lighter colors. Dark Elves are really fond of the purples and the blacks. You can also see a Drukai symbol on this person's chest. And early on in this video, we've already seen these are what are called dark shards, which of course have repeating crossbows, which shoot 2 shots each, which you get a nice little shot of later. And if you look carefully in the background, you can see like bleak swords and spears and stuff like that. Of course, for the High Elves, this is like one of the only units we get to see, which is the High Elf Spearmen. Once again, blues and golds are what you're looking for when you're looking for High Elves. Blues and golds. Other than that, there's not too much to see here. All we really see are spearmen. For the Dark Elves, then, we've got our Witch Elves, who are looking fantastic. I really like the way they made them designed. And then here, of course, is Teclis, who is one of the 2 legendary lords for the High Elves, followed up very quickly by none other than Malekith, the Witch King, who is the faction leader for the Dark Elves, wielding his iconic sword Destroyer. I'm glad that they put his face mask in. There are some iterations where this is just like a black void space, even though he's supposed to have a mask there, because Malekith's skin is so horribly burned, he physically can't stand having any part of himself exposed. It's just too painful for him. Okay, and this is Teclis. There's been some people who have been confused by a couple of little things, like they think maybe it's just regular Archmage. No, this is definitely Teclis. He has the Staff of Lilith. He's got the iconic War Crown of Sapphire. It's 100% without a doubt Teclis. So what is this thing? There's been a lot of speculation about it, and what I can tell you with a very close to 100% certainty is that this stone edifice here is what is called a nexus point. So the Lizardmen have this, and we'll look at a map of it in a little bit, but they have this network of ley lines that go across the entire world, but are primarily focused in Lustria. That's called the geomantic web. And at each point where these lines cross, there's usually, well, there always is some sort of artifact or building or edifice that is the anchor point for that part of the web. Most of them are like Lizardman temple cities or famous towering constructs of magical majesty. This one's just kind of a more simple stone well, but it does have some interestingness to it. For instance, this symbol is not just a meaningless symbol. This is the eternal coil, which for the Lizardmen is a symbol that in their language represents the city of Zlanhapek, which is also known as the City of Mists. And we'll talk about that more later, but one thing you're going to notice throughout this trailer is that until Teclis uses magic to dispel it, there's actually a really dense and heavy fog surrounding this entire area, which has a lot to do with the Temple City of Zlanhapek and the way that it operates. So this could be kind of a hint about exactly where this trailer is taking place, and I even have some suspicions I may have narrowed down an exact point it takes place at if CA bothered to make this video that accurate. It could be they just threw some cool shit, because the rest of the symbols on this wheel are basically nonsense. Like, they mean something, but together they don't mean anything. Like this symbol up here, this twin-tailed serpent, that's the symbol for Tlaxcotl, who's one of the old ones of the Lizardmen, and he's kind of the god of impassiveness and stoicism, and he represents the cold-bloodedness of the Lizardmen and how they don't respond to anything in the way... They don't have like any emotions in a sense that Warmbloods would understand. They're purely instinctual. And he represents a lot of that coldness that is so iconic of their race and is one of the primary gods of the Lizardmen when it comes to things like war, because he represents the idea of permanently standing your ground and being afraid of nothing and not giving in to any sense of emotion. And back in the day, when the Lizardmen in Tabletop were able to take spawning marks, which were kind of like marks of chaos, and that like you could, instead of just having Saurus, you could have Saurus of Tlaxcotl, who would, give the Saurus like a special trait. So like, if you gave Chaos Warriors the Mark of Khorne, they became frenzied. Well, if you gave Saurus made them of the spawning of Tlaxcotl, they were immune to psychology, because he truly brought out that cold-blooded impassiveness in them. But let's keep going. So this is the symbol for Zlanhapek lighting up, which might mean he's nearby the Temple City. So this is obviously the Great Vortex, which is one of the most important facets of Lizardman culture. Not Lizardman culture, Warhammer culture. It's one of the most crucial, fundamental things that anyone who wants to learn the lore of Warhammer needs to understand about the world on a global scale. Because this creation of the elves, which that's Kalidor Dragon Tamer in the center, who's he's kind of the preeminent archmage of the High Elves. Like, he was the most powerful wizard that ever existed for them, and it was his brilliance that came up with the Vortex after a lot of research and sacrifices. And the Vortex is so complicated, it kind of would warrant a whole lore video in and of itself. It's a really complicated mechanism, and the fact that it's going to be center stage for this game, I think, is really cool, and I can't wait to see how they're going to implement it. The Vortex is really complicated, and there is no such thing as a race that would not benefit from taking control of it. So I think the fact that they're making this the main focus between the Dark Elves, the High Elves, the Lizardmen, and the Skaven is a really great idea, and it fits really well thematically in the lore. But let's keep going. Alright, so it looks like from the way that he pulls that lightning bolt out, that Teclis is essentially drawing power out of the geomantic web, which is very likely what he's doing. either using its power to gain a more core understanding of a way to repair the vortex, or maybe he's trying to learn how to harness the geomantic web itself in order to use it to bolster the vortex, which has happened in the past. In the lore of the Warhammer world, the Slaawn have stabilized the vortex before, so it's not unprecedented. Alright, then that person gets shot. Oh, that actually reminds me of an interesting point worth bringing out. One thing I really like about this video that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is that it's really genuinely hard to tell the gender of most of the elves in this cinematic. Like, Teclis is obviously male, and the witch elves are obviously women, but if you watch the trailer of just the high elf spearmen and the dark elf crossbows, it's genuinely difficult to figure out if these are male or females. And I actually really like that. I really like elves appearing kind of androgynous, because to humans they should. And I'm extremely fond that they decided to go with that appearance, and because also in a lot of these elven units, they tend to be mixed gendered. They tend to be like, you know, men and women fighting alongside one another, just because the elves don't have enough of a population to only be male only in battle. Everyone has to pull their weight. So hopefully this is an indicative sign that this will continue into gameplay. But then again, I mean, obviously these graphics were probably done by a studio outside of Creative Assembly, like a third party. So I'm hoping though that this is a concept that they were intentionally going for. Alright, Teclis is casting a bit of magic here. This definitely looks like the Shield of Safari, which is a pretty famous system from High Elf magic. High Elf magic, or High Magic, is their primary lore, which the Lizardmen also have access to as of 8th edition, is very much about defense. It is all about defense. Most of the lore revolves around the idea of either protecting your troops or doing things to limit the enemy's ability to do damage, like destroying or lessening magic items, draining magic out of the air so that it's harder for enemies to cast, or just casting shields and buffs and other stuff like that. That's a hardcore specialty of High Magic. It's not a very offensive lore. It's extremely defensive, with a lot of buffs and just outright protective spells. It does, of course, have one really famous damaging spell, but we'll talk about that later. Like, alright, so there's that thick fog I'm talking about again, and out comes Big Daddy. Alright, and if you don't live under a rock, you probably already know that this is a Carnosaur with an Oblood, or maybe a Scarvetter on top. So this is the monstrous mount for the Saurus in the Lizardman army, and is, of course, a very, very iconic mount in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. A giant pissed-off T-Rex being ridden by a smaller but equally pissed-off T-Rex is just awesome. However, there are a lot of websites that are telling people that this is Kroq-Gar. And I want to make it abso-fucking-lutely clear that this is not Kroq-Gar. Kroq-Gar wears a ton of armor. He has a gauntlet, basically, the gauntlet is so ridiculously heavy that it almost looks like Kroq-Gar has his left arm amputated to put a gauntlet over it because of how encased in metal it is. And as you can see, you can definitely see this dude's hand. So he's not wielding the hand of the gods. He's missing Kroq-Gar's chest armor, which Kroq-Gar has like shoulder pads and chest armor made of gold that covers a good portion of his body. This is also definitely not the Spear of Tlonxla, which has a different design and doesn't have this goofy little spike thing coming out of it. Other than that, does he have a similar seat to Kroq-Gar? Yes. But is he Kroq-Gar? Absolutely not. So anyone who tells you this is Kroq-Gar, just slap him in the face, because they're wrong. And this probably is not what Grimlock will look like either. If they go with the iconic Games Workshop design, Grimlock is more of shades of red and like a pale, like a pale cream tone. He's more of those colors, not this kind of bluish green color scheme. But obviously they can change Grimlock's color scheme. Then here we've got a bunch of skinks. With this particular skink who has become a meme very recently. And you'll notice there are a couple of variants of skinks that we see here. Obviously there are the javelin skinks. Seem to be... actually, no, that's the only variant of skink. There are multiple variants of Saurus. But here you see javelin skinks. These are likely the skink cohorts, which are the rank and file unit that are technically melee, but there are no pure melee skinks. Every single skink in tabletop has a shooting weapon. That's what they do. Skink cohorts throw javelins. Skink skirmishers can throw javelins or have blowpipes. Skinks, chameleon skinks have blowpipes, so on and so forth. Skinks are 100% of a ranged unit. If you're using them in melee, you're either sacrificing them to buy yourself some time, or you messed up. Obviously behind them we have the Saurus, which there are a couple variants you can see in these shots. A lot of people have already stated that, of course, there's this kind of weird two-handed variant, which I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a one-handed variant that's just holding their weapon in two hands, or if that's supposed to be a legitimate great weapon variant, because the great weapon variant did not exist in tabletop. So although I certainly would not be sad to see it, it would actually be a brand new unit, so that'd be kind of cool. But if they wanted to provide the lizardmen with like an armor-piercing core unit, then that would be likely why they created these guys, because in traditional tabletop, Saurus are spears, hand weapon, and shield. That's your only option. Which, speaking of the spears, I think if you look right here, there's a Saurus this guy right back here. You can see his shield and his arm. He's holding a spear. So you can see that there's probably going to be 3 variants of Saurus, which will likely be a great weapon variant, the traditional hand weapon and shield variant, and then a spear and shield variant. That's what I hope anyway. And hopefully with the spears you'll get your anti-large bonus, and then with your great weapons like this fellow here, you'll get your armor piercing. And then up here is Big Daddy himself. That's the second time I've used that phrase, but whatever. This is confirmed to be Lord Mazdamundi. This is not just a generic Slaawn, this is Mazdamundi himself. And of course he's got the glowing yellow eyes, probably indicating him as the Sun Lord of Hexadol, and he actually has the iconic helmet that exists in Mazdamundi's really old artwork, I think back from 6th edition. Mazdamundi, if you're familiar with Warhammer, you'll notice the Slaawn look really different. Not bad, just different. Traditionally, Slaawn are a little bit... like, this one looks more like an actual toad and less alien than the regular Slaawn look. Traditionally, Slaawn have much larger heads, and their eyes are huge. Like, they have giant bulbous eyes, not these kind of little, like, almost human-looking eyes just set in a frog's head. Also, their fingers tend to be super long and multi-jointed, whereas these guys literally just have kind of humanish hands that just have 4 fingers, and they're kind of fat and stubby. So these guys definitely look more... they're much squatter looking and much more toad-like than the original Slaawn from Warhammer Fantasy. I'm not sure if this is what they'll look like in game, or if this is just the art that they're using for this particular video. But I don't dislike the change. I just found it interesting that the Slaawn are so different looking from their tabletop counterparts. Because so far, everything that's been in the game, with the exception of, like, Morgar's lower body, has been extremely faithfully recreated from tabletop. So it'll be interesting to see if the Slaawn have actually changed this drastically. But I don't think it's a bad thing. Alright, everybody's charging in. If you paid attention to the Dark Elves, you'd see some bleak swords and stuff. Here, of course, we see a couple of more units. You can see these Great Eagles that have riders atop them. These are likely Lord and Archmage, or Prince and Archmage variants. So they're just Great Eagle with riders, kind of like you see in the Wood Elves, but obviously they look a lot more haughty, is that the word I want to use? A lot more royal, because they have like these really fancy seats that they're sitting on, as opposed to the wood elves who tend to like just like ride bareback and stuff. You can also see some lizardmen pterodons, which of course have skinks on their back and have giant rocks or giant boulders that they carry around. They just drop on top of people, which gives them a really shitty day, which I imagine will function a lot like gyro bombers do. And you can tell they're pterodons because of the blue-green coloration. And I think that's a Carnosaur or a Stegodon right there. I'm not really sure what that is. Well, it's not moving, so maybe it's just a random icon. And this kind of goes further to support my idea that this event likely takes place near Hexadol, is that it looks like Teclis discovered whatever he did, because the High Elves are right here, the Dark Elves are right here, and the Lizardmen are right here. So it looks like Teclis may have found his little doohickey somewhere in this ballpark, or it could just be vaguely related. But I honestly think this takes place next to Zlanhepek just because it looks like they're right smack in the middle of a Lizardman temple city, and Zlanhepek definitely falls along the great the ley lines that make up the geomantic web. So it could be that Teclis was trying to tap into the power of the geomantic web next to Zlanhepek. Malekith had a similar idea and followed him there to ambush him, and then the Lizardmen got super pissed that everybody was there and attacked. Another thing I want to note is a lot of people see this footage right here, this part, and they think, oh, it's a three-way battle. But just to, like, temper the hype a bit, if you really pay attention, each of the armies actually splits in half. Like, there's a clear line I can draw between each of the three armies, and they're all dividing in half to go attack each other. So it's High Elves versus Dark Elves, High Elves versus Lizardmen, Lizardmen versus Dark Elves. So it's actually 3 2v2 battles, not one big 3v3, so don't be one of those people that, like, is like, oh, 3v3 confirmed, and then gets super upset when that's not actually something you can do in game. I don't think free-for-alls or 3v3 battles are going to be in this game. I think this clip is just a little misleading at face value. Alright, and then, of course, Lustria looks fantastic, and you can see the Great Vortex in the background. That's not a lot to talk about there, just all that jazz. And then, of course, the final little clip. A lot of people have pointed out that these Skaven symbols down here, the logo, they did confirm that there's a little hint in the logo, but whether it's that these Skaven symbols, which represent numbers for council or for seat positions, on the Council of 13, whether those are just random symbols or whether they're supposed to actually mean something, I don't know the answer to yet. I've looked up the council seats that these pertain to, and all 4 of them are basically minor clans. Like, they're none of the really famous 5 clans, because the big 5 are, of course, Pestilens, Eshin, Skarire, and Mulder, and then the 5th, like, kind of pretty famous clan is Clan Moors, which has Queek Headtaker in it and, like, owns part of Carrick 8 Peaks and a bunch of other stuff. And then, of course, there's the Greyseers as well, which own a seat on the council. But none of these 4 are any of those 6. So, the 4 of these pertain to, like, maybe the numbers mean something, but they don't seem to correlate to a date for, like, a release date. They don't seem to correlate to the council seats, because the seats that they pick out are pretty random, and I'm 100% sure that none of those clans are going to be playable. The only way they're going to bring one of these 4 more minor clans in as a playable faction is if, like, they put Greyseer Thankful in the game and, like, give him some random clan to be in charge of instead of just making him in charge of, like, a generic Skaven faction. So I don't know if these hints are just to be like, oh, there's Skaven in the game, or if they're supposed to actually mean something. If they mean something, even with my extensive knowledge and resources and research, I haven't discovered a meaning to it yet. And then, of course, speaking of Skaven, there's this rat at the end who is all gangly and covered in boobos and nastiness. Whether that's supposed to represent Clan Pestilence or not is kind of a toss-up. Like, really all Skaven are generally pretty gross and covered in just nastiness and filth. So if that actually means something, I shrug. That's all I have to say. It seems, I don't know if that's supposed to be like, oh look, Clan Pestilence, because that's just what Skaven look like. Skaven are just gross in general. Clan Pestilence kind of takes it to a level of just absurdity, though. That being said, I'm 100% sure we will see Clan Pestilence in the game. Whether they'll be in the base game or whether they'll be a DLC, that is more of a toss-up. Because I've already figured out some of the DLC units based on what CA said so far, but we'll talk about that a little later, and Clan Pestilence may fall into that. As far as the concept, or not concept art, but the still images goes, you just got Teclis, Mazdamundi, probably an Old Blood on a Carnosaur, could be a Scar Veteran, which is the hero variant on a Carnosaur. Then you've got, of course, Malekith, and then Teclis behind a whole bunch of High Elf Spearmen, clearing out the mist that likely surrounds Lon Hapek. So let's talk about... well, we'll do that later. That's kind of news. So let's just talk about what it's all on this page, because a lot of people did videos on the video, which is playing again, because it's trying to make me upset, and did not go to the Steam page, which was up the day of, and they missed a lot of crucial information that would have answered a bunch of questions. So here it kind of tells you a little bit about the Vortex. We'll talk about that later on. All you really need to know is that the Vortex siphons a bunch of magic out of the world, and without the Vortex, the world would have been completely consumed by demons, because the Great Catastrophe was a basically horrible event where the realm of chaos was ripped open and like surrounded the Warhammer world, and demons were pouring out of every direction in endless numbers and of sizes the likes of which the world has never seen since. And the Lizardmen held back 90% of it for a long time, and then they started losing the war, and it turned on them, and they got pushed back to Lustria and a couple of other places like the Southlands. And at the end of the war, the High Elves were the ones who kind of managed to save the day by creating this vortex that sucked all the magic out of the world, and with no magic, the demons could no longer physically manifest themselves in the Warhammer Fantasy world, so they just poofed out of existence and were banished back to the realm of chaos, which is where they are now. So it's likely the evil factions are going to have something to do with that. So here they go ahead and reveal the faction leaders of 3 of the factions. The High Elves are led by Prince Tyrion, the defender of Ulthuan. So we already know 100% confirmed that the 2 legendary lords for the High Elves are Tyrion and Teclis. They're twin brothers. One of them is super combat crazy, and one of them is a super magic crazy dude, so they're a perfect pick. No questions there. Seems pretty obvious. Next, they reveal the Lizardman faction leader is Lord Mazdamundi, who is the Slaanesh Mage Priest of Hexadal, the Solar City. And they note that the difference between them is both of them are attempting to bolster or strengthen the Vortex, but the difference between the High Elves and the Lizardmen is that Mazdamundi very specifically wants to prevent cataclysm through the method, though the methods of the old ones must prevail. What this likely means is that Mazdamundi and the Slann don't take action unless they basically find some kind of instruction by the old ones telling them, hey, you need to do this thing to further the great plan, which is like the system of order and life that the Lizardmen follows. The great plan, a series of instructions the old ones came up with right before they died and gave to the Lizardmen, were like, hey, follow this and you might save the world. Maybe. But in 8th edition, we finally got a update to the lore where Mazdamundi basically came out and said, okay, I want to follow the great plan, but until we fixed all this bullshit that Chaos is like vomited into the world, we can't go forward with it. We have to fix everything. Then we can continue with the great plan. So what he said was that the Lizardmen needed to clear out all the races that were created by Chaos, or not part of the great plan is the way he worded it. So if you're undead, Skaven, demons, warriors of chaos, greenskins, Chaos Dwarves, Dark Elves, if you're any of those categories, Wood Elves, as far as the Lizardmen are concerned, you're not supposed to exist, and their goal before they get back to creating their utopia is to make sure that you no longer exist. So it could be that he's going to have a lot of focus on eradicating things that are causing problems. And while Tyrion and Teclis might be willing to do almost anything to make the Vortex stronger and bolster it and make sure Ulthuan is safe, Mazdamundi is probably going to focus much more on restoring the power of the geomantic web, which we'll look at a map of that in a little while. He's likely going to restore most of its power by gaining control of all of the various sites along it, which the Lizardmen have lost control of many of them, and they've been desecrated or knocked down or destroyed and need to be rebuilt or repaired or resanctified. That way the geomantic web is balanced in power, and that would give Mazdamundi and the Slann the ability to stabilize the Vortex and beyond. Then, of course, the third faction they've revealed so far is the Dark Elves with their Black Arcs, which they specifically mentioned the Black Arcs from Naggaroth. So I'm really hoping we see them and they have some sort of mechanic, like maybe a mobile city of some sort, or maybe just the Black Arcs are like these super powerful ships that you can like garrison troops in to get them across the ocean, and maybe they have like a really powerful garrison to protect your troops, or you can like recruit troops from them so the Dark Elves are able to like recruit while they're sailing, stuff like that. And it mentions that he sees great opportunity in the demise of the Great Vortex. This will be interesting because Malekith in 8th edition lore, which granted 8th edition basically took all the Dark Elf lore and tossed it on its head and completely changed like a bunch of it. Like, it was so different. And so it kind of looks like and Malekith was not a fan of destroying the Vortex in 8th edition. He thought that was a generally pretty terrible idea. So it could be that we're going back to 7th edition Malekith and more of like the more, not generic evil, but more of just the overall evil form of Malekith. 8th edition Malekith was more like a guy who shitty things happened to, so he became a shitty person. While 7th edition and prior Malekith was much more of a guy who was just always an asshole and was just evil from the day he was born, and nothing changes that, and he just is evil, and he does evil things for his own sake of power, and he's just a jerk. So hopefully we're going back to that form of Malekith, because he does much better as kind of a straightforward leader. The 8th edition one was this really nuanced character, but he wasn't nuanced in an intelligent way. They just sort of like changed a bunch of details to it was dumb. I personally hope they're going back to old Malekith, who was a much more sadistic, cruel son of a bitch, and is going to make for a really fun faction leader. It's likely through the demise of the Vortex he seeks to either bind the demons of chaos to his will, which he's tried to do before, or he seeks to basically unleash all that magic and use it to make himself godlike and make the Dark Elves like one of the most preeminent races in the world just by having them harness it and unleash it to just wipe everybody out. And then, of course, a fourth secretive race stirs, their motives obscured by sinister plots and machinations. So this is the Skaven. It's 100% the Skaven. If anyone tries to tell you it's not the Skaven, you have the authority of whatever power you believe in to slap them for being dumb. It's not the Tomb Kings, it's not Kislev, it's not, you know, Cathay, it's Skaven. It's 100% Skaven. There's Skaven marks on the trailer, there's a frickin' Skaven giant rat in the stupid video, it's Skaven. There are a lot of people who are going to meme you if you're new to this and be like, oh, Skaven, what are, you know, Ratmen don't exist. It's just a meme, guys. The only reason Creative Assembly has not revealed that the Skaven are the fourth faction is for the sake of a meme, which I think is weird, but, you know, if that's what they want to do with their game, whatever. That being said, I am super excited for Skaven. I'm more excited for Lizardmen, but that's because I'm just old school Lizardmen fan. But I can't wait to kill Skaven. Oh my god, I can't wait to kill Skaven. Like, I do in Vermintide already, but it's not the same. Of course, the Skaven having a idea that involves the Great Vortex is so hilarious. I can't wait to see what it is. I hope it's just way over the top. Of course, they talk a little bit here about... this actually caught me and many other people off guard, was that when they talked about the new campaign, a lot of people, just myself included, assumed it was the New World. So, Lustria, Nagaroth, and Ulthuan. But then they dropped this little nugget, which is that it also takes place in the Southlands. And if you don't know, the Southlands are the continent below the Old World, so which is like the equivalent of Africa, essentially. So the Southlands getting added to the game is a really big surprise, because A, that means the map is a lot bigger than I thought it was, and B, I honestly did not think they were going to bring in the Southlands until the third game, because I was expecting like a Southlands and Darklands DLC, or not DLC, but campaign for the third game that would bring in like Tomb Kings, Chaos Dwarfs, Ochre Kingdoms, and Demons of Chaos. So with the Southlands being added in the game, and if you watch a video, like when they did EGX Res, they had like a developer video that went out immediately after the main campaign trailer, and they talked about that they had to make a lot of unique desert maps, which seems to indicate that the Land of the Dead, aka Nehekara, aka the where the Tomb Kings hang out, may be in this game, which could mean that the Tomb Kings are DLC for this game. That would really surprise me, because if that's the case, I don't know who the fourth race for the Game 3 launch is going to be, because if you've been keeping track, we already have 8 races in the game, and there's only 16. So, with this game, we now have 12 races in the game. So, I don't know what the deal is there. Like, it could be that they're just adding most of the Southlands, so maybe you get, like, Araby and all the jungle portions of the Southlands, and maybe the Land of the Dead is just left uninhabitable, like you can't go in it and it's not accessible, and it's all covered in, like, fog of war or whatever. But... so I don't know. That being said, if there's not Tomb Kings for this game, I also don't know what kind of big DLCs they can do for Game 2. So really big toss-up. Either way, I'm super excited. This will definitely be the starting location of the Skaven. Most people don't know that the Skaven are the preeminent rulers of the Southlands. There is a Lizardman presence in the Southlands, but every single Warhammer edition, they have become less and less and less iconic and less and less and less important. And like back in 6th edition, there used to be a couple cities, and then in like 7th edition, there was only like 2 cities, and then in 8th edition, I think they sort of mentioned that Zlatlan is like the only functioning temple city in the entire continent. So it's likely that there's going to be like a minor Lizardman faction there that probably owns like a province or something, but I would be surprised if there's more than that. Clan Pestilence, on the other hand, owns a shitload of the Southlands. Like, they have a huge monopoly on the Southlands, and that's where 90% of all their stuff is. So, and that's where their capital is as well, which I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. But that's likely where Clan Pestilence will have their starting location. So probably both of the Skaven characters will start there, which leads me on to my next point, is that, of course, there are 8 Legendary Lords confirmed, so 2 per faction, and each of them has a unique geographical starting position. So I am super happy to hear that they have unique starting locations. I thought that was something I really enjoyed about the new races that we got in Total War Warhammer 1, with the Beastmen and the Wood Elves having, and the Bretonnians all having separate starting locations. It helps make their campaigns a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and it of course allows you to play co-op right off the bat, which is a really big plus. And the more options fans have, the happier I will always be. And then of course they talk about the grand merger, which will merge the Old World and the New World and the Southlands into one massive global map, which we will talk about probably now. So, I'm just going to put up a generic, let's put up Masmudi in the background. So, what is this? I don't care. Oh wait, no, let's talk about this. Okay. I don't know why Steve's freaking out and like showing me shit I don't care about. So, this is the only other thing they've released so far, but it does tell us a lot. So, the Bastillodon is the first absolutely confirmed concept art piece that we've had from Total War Warhammer 1. And the Bastillodon is basically a super tank that functions as magical artillery for the Lizardmen. However, what's interesting is they've confirmed that there are 2 variants that are gonna be in this game, which is the one that has no adornment, so it's just a regular Bastillodon, so it's just this monster without any of this crap on top. And it's just going to be a big, tanky monster that you just throw into the lines, and they just cause terror and tank and do damage. And then the other variant is, of course, what you're seeing in this artwork that they mentioned down here, is that if they're favored by Sotek, the Lord of the Sun, and kind of the patron of the Solar City, have solar engines, which basically shoot giant laser beams that are like the sun's rays magnified through this magical crystal. And it fires a big old laser beam just like the Luminarch of Hysh. So I imagine it's going to function the exact same. Of course, it'll have some different abilities, and it will probably be not nearly as fast as the Luminarch is, but it's probably going to be a shitload better in close combat. It's probably going to be way tougher. And if, of course, just like the Luminarch, it's probably going to provide a buff to everyone nearby, because I think the Luminarch, if you are put it close to your Empire soldiers, I think it gives them like a slight damage resistance buff or physical resistance, something like 10%. For the Lizardmen, it's supposed to make them faster and more energized, so I imagine it's going to be a small buff to like their melee attack, something like that. I am really glad to see the Bastillodon in the game. He was definitely one of the ones that was a little questionable, and I'm glad he has at least 2 variants. But this kind of falls into my DLC discussion. And for those of you who are wondering about my global map tangent, I will get to that in just a moment. So the Bastillodon has 2 variants in tabletop, which is the Solar Engine, which is the one you're seeing here, and then another one which is called the Ark of Sotek. And what that one is, they have this neat little device on their back that basically vomits out an literally endless horde of serpents. And the serpents basically pour out onto the ground and attack everything around them and poison people to death. So I think it's actually quite easy for them to program the functionality of that into this game, but I think they're saving that Bastillodon, for a DLC, because I honestly think the 2 legendary Lords of the Lizardmen are 100% certain to be Mazdamundi, who's already been revealed, and Krokgar, who is the Saurus Old Blood big boss, and he rides on a giant pissed off T-Rex named Grimlock. However, there is a 3rd Lord of the Lizardmen who is very iconic, and who, like, I started my name based off. You know, I'm the Loremaster of Sotek. Well, he's the Prophet of Sotek. And he is Tenenhuan, who is a skink lord. And he's the only skink lord that's ever existed. So he's a really big deal for Lizardman players. But he is the Prophet of Sotek, and he was, like, he was the penultimate enemy of the Skaven. Like, his existence was defined by the big, huge war between the Skaven and the Lizardmen when they first met each other and had their big war, 100-year war in Lustria. So I honestly think there's probably going to be a DLC that comes down down the chute. Hopefully it's the first DLC we get for this game. The first true DLC. And it's probably going to be called something like The Rat and the Serpent, which is the name of the famous campaign that happened between the 2 of them. And it's probably going to feature Tenenhuan as the legendary lord of the Lizardmen, bringing in a lot of, like, poisonous stuff. So he's probably one of the units he's probably going to get as a DLC unit is the Bastillodon with the Ark of Sotek, which I imagine is probably going to have, like, a constant damage buff around itself like the Mortis engine does, and maybe it provides poison attacks to all nearby allies. But regardless, that seems pretty concrete in my opinion based on this post here, because I think the Ark of Sotek is something they're definitely going to want to do, especially since they've done 90% of the work with the Bastillodon. So keep an eye out for that DLC. I'm calling it now. So, with that taken care of, let's go ahead and talk about the final thing, which is the global campaign. So, CA just did a Q&A today. At the time I'm recording this, about the global campaign map. And the global campaign map, they've confirmed, is going to be the entirety of the old world. So if you own Game 1 or you've seen Game 1, every single city, every single province, every single faction, every single region of the old world is 100% confirmed in the global campaign map. Then what they're going to do is they're going to add on the New World and the Southlands in their entirety. However, the shapes of them are going to be a little bit different to fit better with the old world. And they're also going to resize a little bit of the southern portions of the Southlands and Lustria. They're going to tinker with their provinces and regions a little bit to make them work a little better. Because you got to remember, Game 2 has more provinces and more settlements than Game 1 does. So they're probably going to change Game 2 a little bit. I've heard it already confirmed that it's only the very southern portions of the map. To finagle them a little bit, to combine a couple of little things. And I've heard that the most major thing happening is that one of the legendary lords whose start position is in the Southlands has to be moved because the region he starts in no longer exists in the Great Global Campaign map. So that means that the Global Campaign map is fucking huge because it's all of the first game plus 95% of the second game. That's a really, really big map. They've also confirmed that pretty much every single faction, I think with the exception of maybe one or two minor ones from Game 2, is in the game. So that's a shitload of factions. And they have said that it's all one big seamless map. There's no theaters. There's no like screen where you have to transition between like the new world and the old world, or like sail to the end of the map and then you teleport somewhere. No, it's one big map. Which means that it's going to be super amazing. It's going to be super fun. They have talked about that if you play on the big global campaign map, all the races can conquer anywhere. So if you're playing as the Empire, you can conquer the the Karaks and the Badlands and all that stuff, which you normally can't in Game 1. But if you play on the global map, the Game 1 races will be able to conquer everywhere, just like the Game 2 races can. However, they're planning on implementing a system where if you conquer places that aren't really fitting of your race, so like the Empire takes over the Badlands, then there might be certain penalties they get to those settlements to represent that it's really difficult for them to live there. I think that's a mechanic that's being introduced in Game 2, so like maybe if the Lizardmen take over Nagaroth, they have some penalties, or if like the High Elves take over Lustria, there are some penalties. So I think we're going to be seeing that, and that's what they're going to be evolving to fit the global campaign. But I'm very excited by that. They said that right now it appears that the end turn, especially at the start of the campaign, might be a little bit... It's a little long for the global campaign, but they've decided that that's an okay sacrifice in order to have that really big, huge campaign map. And I 100% agree. If you're playing on a giant world-spanning map and you think the end turn isn't maybe going to take a couple extra seconds, you're an idiot. Because to have that much stuff going on, the AI and the computer kind of need a minute to think. So if you don't want to deal with a little bit longer wait times, don't play the global map. It's that simple. The regular maps are plenty large as it is. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's everything. Like I said, the trailer didn't really have any spectacular hints. Granted, the trailer for Game 1 didn't really have any either. And, it had some dwarvish that read like fire and darkness, or fire and blood and darkness is coming to consume us all, or whatever crap. And it was supposed to be like a hint that chaos was coming, but there was already a greater demon in the trailer, so it was kind of an underwhelming discovery. I feel like with Game 2, it's very much the same, where they didn't really hide anything super amazing. Like from the giant wheel Teclis interacts with, it looks like they were fighting in Zlanhepek because that's the symbol for the Lizardman city. Because, funny enough, the Lizardmen have a written language that's documented by Games Workshop, and it's a really crazy language. It's very hard to write and read because all of their letters are like freaking symbols, so writing it takes just forever. But each of the Lizardman cities has a symbol that represents it. And that one was the symbol for Zlanhepek, and of course I talked about some of the other symbols. I've looked at the entire wheel, though, and I haven't seen anything that seems to indicate any sort of message. It just looks like a couple of symbols. Like, a few of them represent certain old ones, and a few of them represent, like, random letters and numbers, and then the one that Teclis lands on is Zlonhapek, and there's mists everywhere, and they're in the middle of a temple city. So it looks like it was just like, hey, you're in Zlonhapek, and have realigned this nexus to, like, activate your ability to access the geomantic web. Oh, let's actually look at that real quick. So this is the map of Lustria I was talking about that shows you the lines of power, or the ley lines that represent and make up the geomantic web. And you see that pretty much everywhere they crisscross, most of them crisscross on a place where there's something the Lizardmen have built to protect that nexus or to harness it. So every single one of the temple cities, for instance, lies on a nexus. And there's many, like, icons of the old ones, or special edifices where they just naturally line up, like the Emerald Pools or the Guacamole Crater, and all that kind of stuff. So this web is essentially, the geomantic web is basically the Warhammer Earth, the Warhammer planet's natural reservoir of energy. You know, where the winds of magic are this unnatural maelstrom of energy that blow around the world out of the realms of chaos and get sucked back out through the vortex, and are very dangerous to use. Like, if you use the winds of magic, you can miscast, which in Total War Warhammer is kind of like your character mildly explodes and takes some damage, but in Tabletop or the lore, miscasting is a fucking scary thing. Like, your head can explode, or like a demon will reach out and devour your soul, or you'll accidentally, like, teleport everyone, including yourself, into a volcano. Like, the consequences are terrifying and dire. Magic is not to be messed with from a lore standpoint. In Total War Warhammer, it's more like a mild, you know, it's kind of like a kitten compared to a tiger when it comes to the way magic works in Total War Warhammer to the lore, or even Tabletop in many ways. These ley lines make up the geomantic web, which is like a natural pool that flows and replenishes through the movement of the earth and all that other stuff. And this is what the Slawn use to cast their magic, and this is why the Slawn, when they tap into it, are like the most unparalleled wizards in the entire Warhammer universe. Because their magic, when they decide to pull it from the web, which is considered very desperate, is completely pure. It can't miscast. It can't explode in their face. It's this golden reservoir of energy that they can use to just annihilate entire cities or countries. So to them, strengthening this is a big deal, and a lot of the other races will probably be coming down into Lustria to try and steal it, or to try and manipulate it, and the Lizardmen are going to get super pissed about it. But that's generally all you need to know for right now about Game 2. I'll make more videos as more information comes out. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss anything, but if there's anything you guys have heard, feel free to post it in the comment section below or ask questions, and I will try and answer all your questions. My goal right now is to stop the misinformation that's being spread about this game. There are some crazy theories out there with people just wondering some goofy-ass stuff. And I'll tell you now, is like the most important things I can tell you is that the 4th race is Skaven, and that the global map is happening. It's a free DLC. You don't have to pay for it. It's going to be the first DLC that comes out after Game 2. It's going to have a public beta test from what Total War or Creative Assembly said so far, which means that everybody's going to have the opportunity to beta test it and provide feedback, which means there's a really good chance we'll catch 90% of the bugs, and it's going to be a great time, and it's going to be super fun, and all that jazz. So that should be pretty good for now. My throat's starting to tickle because I haven't used it in a while, and I'm talking my ear off here, and yours. So I think we're good for now. I am very, very excited for Game 2. I hope I can get you guys some more information on it soon, or CA just says more about it, one of the two. And I look forward to having all of this as playable. Like, you see this map right here? This map right here. This entire map is going to be playable. Is that not insane? Is that not insane? So yeah, I hope you all are doing well. My voice is finally back, so I can of course get back to finishing Dorthu, which is so close to being done. And I can't tell you how upset I've been that I've been too sick to record, because I really didn't like that project just gathering dust on me. And of course, we're approaching 5,000 subs, which a very special event will happen. When that happens, I'll be doing a lore video I've been avoiding for a very long time, just due to how long it's going to be when 5,000 is hit, and some other stuff. Hope you're all doing great. I've said that already. I need to stop talking. I need to end this video. All right. Goodbye, guys. I will be seeing you around quite a bit, and I'm probably going to be streaming a lot in the near future. So if you're bored, you might go follow me on twitch.tv/Loremaster of Sotek in the mornings, or like what morning in America, and just kind of keep your eye out. Like, have it follow and notify you when I'm online, because I'm probably going to be on a lot, just to like give my voice some practice so I can get back to talking for long periods of time without it being hurting and all that stuff. So hope to see you guys there. In any event, it's time for me to go. So yeah, take care of yourselves. I will see you around. Goodbye.